On January 16, 1967, in the village of Tattingstone in Suffolk, England, a farmer by the name of Fred Berge came across two mysterious suitcases that had been left near a hedge in a field. Police came to inspect the suitcases, only to find they had been filled with human remains. The body of a teenage male had been expertly dissected into 8 pieces and stuffed inside the suitcases. Police were unable to identify the remains, so they came up with an unorthodox method of finding out who they belonged to. They released a photograph of the victim's decapitated head to several news outlets, in the hopes that someone would come forward to identify him. Shortly after it was published, a family from North London reached out to police, stating the victim was their 17-year-old son, Bernard Michael Oliver. Bernard was one of 6 children in the Oliver household and worked at a warehouse in Muswell Hill. On January 6th, Bernard left his home to visit his friends for the evening. When he failed to return home the following morning, his father George reported him missing. It wasn't until 10 days later that his remains were found inside the suitcases. The Metropolitan Police soon launched an investigation into Bernard's murder. An autopsy confirmed his cause of death to be strangulation, and there was evidence that he had been sexually assaulted as well. It was estimated that he was killed about 2 days before he was discovered. According to Bernard's brother Tony, his hair had been freshly cut and his nails had been manicured. Examination of the suitcases provided little help to investigators. The letters PVA were painted on the outside of one of the cases. A hand towel with the laundry mark QL42 was also discovered. Investigators also found a neatly folded sports jacket rumored to belong to Bernard. Inside one of its pockets was a matchbox that came from a brand marketed in Israel. Aside from the jacket, no other pieces of clothing were found inside the cases. In the first 4 months of the investigation, over 2,000 statements were submitted to police to help with the inquiry. Some witnesses claimed to see Bernard in the Muswell Hill area sometime after he disappeared. Another witness reported that on the night the murder supposedly took place, they saw a middle-aged man wearing a trilby and trench coat, carrying a suitcase and walking towards Tattingstone, the village where the suitcases were later dumped. Because the autopsy revealed evidence of sexual assault, case detectives at the time claimed that they would interview every gay man in London to try and identify whoever was responsible. At the time of Bernard's death, homosexuality was illegal in the United Kingdom, and it wasn't until July 27th of that year that it was partially legalized. Over the years, several people have been named as suspects, but none have been definitively linked to the killing. Documents released in 2004 under the Freedom of Information Act revealed the prime suspects in the case, Martin Reddington and John Biles. Both men were medical doctors that had histories of sexually assaulting young males. In 1965, Reddington was suspected of sodomy and indecent assault. He had a warrant out for his arrest, but he fled to South Africa shortly afterwards. In 1977, when Bernard's case was reopened, a private investigator recognized one of the suitcases that was used. She told detectives that it belonged to Reddington and 2 other men, and that the suitcase was used to bring clothing to a laundromat. Despite this, police had no solid evidence to extradite Reddington, who at that time had moved to Australia. That same year, Reddington would be charged in Sydney for indecent assault of a male victim. The other prime suspect, John Biles, along with another man, had previously been acquitted of assaulting a teenage boy in 1963. In the early 70s, police began investigating the sexual assault of several young boys in Huddersfield, which led to Biles moving to Australia as well. On December 17, 1974, he was arrested and charged in Sydney for the previous sexual assault of a boy when he was still in London. He jumped bail soon after, and a month later on January 19, 1975, his body was discovered in the room of a Queensland hotel. Biles left behind 2 suicide notes, one addressed to Reddington, the other to the Metropolitan Police. The latter contained an apology for the crimes he committed, but made no direct mention of Bernard Oliver's murder. Reddington himself would pass away in 1995. The 2 men were also suspected of murdering a young boy in 1973 after having sexual relations with him. However, like with Bernard Oliver's death, no solid evidence has been found linking them to the murder. Another person suspected in Bernard's death is Joe Meek, an influential British music producer well known for pioneering experimental recording techniques at the time, such as sampling and reverberation. He suffered from bipolar disorder and schizophrenia, and feared he would be blacklisted for being homosexual. His deteriorating mental state reached a breaking point on February 3, 1967, when he got into an argument with his landlady, Violet Shenton. He grabbed a shotgun and fatally shot her in the back, then turned the gun on himself. The murder-suicide took place less than a month after Bernard's remains were found. It's been speculated that Bernard worked at Meek's recording studio as a tape stacker, leading some to believe he was involved in his death. Reginald Cray, known in London for his involvement in gang activity alongside his twin brother Ronald, has also been accused of killing Bernard. The same year the murder took place, the two purchased a property in the village of Bildeston, about 26 kilometers northwest of Tattingstone. The following year, the twins were sentenced to life in prison for the murders of fellow gangsters George Cornell and Jack McVitie. Reginald would serve 33 years in prison before dying from bladder cancer in 2000. Shortly before his passing, Reginald confessed to an unknown murder while being interviewed for a BBC documentary. He also made this confession to a fellow inmate 16 years prior, describing the victim as a young gay boy, but neglected to state his name. While many believe he was referring to Edward Smith, another gangster who mysteriously disappeared in 1967, some speculate that he was actually confessing to Bernard's death, given his connection to the Tattingstone area at the time. In 2011, Tony Oliver, Bernard's youngest sibling, spoke publicly about the murder for the first time. He was 13 years old when he saw the headline of his brother's murder, and even over 40 years later, he still thought about him nearly every week. Quote, "There are times even now when I can't believe what happened. I think we could have accepted it in a different way if Bernard had been shot or killed in a fight, but the way his body was dissected in such a clinical way was spine-chilling. And then to see his head in a newspaper, it's hard to come to terms with." Their parents, George and Sheila, both passed away in the 1980s, never getting closure on what happened to their son. "It was terrible for my parents to go to their graves without knowing what happened to Bernard," Tony said. "I still believe somebody who knows what happened to Bernard is still alive. I've never given up hope." Police have reopened the case many times over the years, as recently as 2017, in the hopes of finding new information. A potential lead emerged when a man who had previously reached out to police contacted them again in 2012. He claimed that in the days prior to the discovery of Bernard's remains, he witnessed a man wearing medical gloves and carrying 2 suitcases in the Ipswich Docks area, about 10 kilometers northeast of Tattingstone. Despite this, the exact location of where Bernard's murder took place, and more importantly, whoever was responsible for the grisly crime, continues to remain a mystery.